it's it a lot. It was pretty much like the Islamic version of Scientology.
I was about to say that same thing. I was like, is that disrespectful to call it the Islamic Scientology? There you go. I started using that as like a gimmick, but then it actually really helped me during editing. So
I can imagine. Yeah.
So first of all, if you'd like, you could just kind of introduce yourself, who you are, the religion you grew up in, if you still identify with it, and anything else you think we should know about you and what you're all about.
Fantastic. Okay. My name is Far-ahd Muhammad. I am a quasi-comedian. I also have done stage performances in terms of like sketch comedy. I'm an actor. I'm an improviser in some cases. Been doing a lot more announcing work as of recently as well. I've also seen on a lot of videos done by Channel Awesome. I also do a lot of motion graphics for them as well. So anyway.
Wow. Jack of all trades. That's awesome.
I try to be. Yeah. The religion I grew up with is actually kind of strange. It is an offshoot of a major religion.
Okay.
Back in the 1930s to like the 1970s, there was a religion called the Nation of Islam that was led at that time by a man named Elijah Muhammad. Mm-hmm. In fact, my middle name is Elijah. I was kind of named after him, as well as the founder of the Nation of Islam, W.D. Far-ahd Muhammad. So that's where the name came from.
Wow.
I originally grew up in like another version of that because Elijah Muhammad died in 1975, and then it was taken on by, I think, Elijah Muhammad's son, Warith Deen Muhammad, as well as another version done by Louis Farrakhan. And my family pretty much still believed in like the Elijah Muhammad version, so we never really got past 1975 in that way. And so I lived at the time with my grandmother and my mom and my brother, and so we were like taught a lot of that stuff in that regard there. I do not still believe in that religion. I do not believe in any religion, actually. I am now what is now considered to be an atheist, I believe.
Right.
But I'm always open to the idea that I might be wrong, but at the same time, I pretty much like eschew that whole part of my religion or any sort of religiosity inside of myself from like my mid-20s, and I eschew the whole Nation of Islam stuff since I was like 21 or something like that. So yeah, that's pretty much how it all went down.
Interesting. And so what is the difference between the like 1975 belief system version of that offshoot and the other offshoots that have kind of existed since then? Like if you had to pick like a main difference between them. Like what was it about that one that kept your parents involved as opposed to moving with a different one?
Well, I know that Warith Deen Muhammad really wanted to move away from the Elijah Muhammad led aspects of the Nation of Islam and go more towards Orthodox Islam and like more of this, Sunni Shiite versions of Islam. And so he considered himself an imam instead of a messenger of a messenger of Allah or a messenger of Muhammad or whatever. And it was a lot more in line with like what actual Islam is supposed to be. That is not what my family wanted to do, apparently.
So more of like a liberal conservative.
Kind of, yeah. I mean, it's more. I mean, the thing about the Nation of Islam is that I think both religions were fairly conservative, but
yeah.
I think that the Warith Deen Muhammad version was definitely more of an orthodox of Islam more than the Nation of Islam.
Got it.
And a lot less emphasis on like black supremacy and all that there, which is one of the reasons I kind of like moved away from that religion. There are some things about the Nation of Islam I do find to be a bit positive. Things about pride in oneself and doing for oneself and not relying on other people in order to bring you up from whatever sort of horrible status that you're in. But that was also shackled, for lack of a better term, with all different sorts of horrible racist ideas and ideologies.
Wow.
Stuff regarding about white people being devils and that the America is the devil's stronghold and that there's going to be a spaceship that will destroy America. It was pretty much like the the Islamic version of Scientology.
I was about to say that same thing. I was like, is that disrespectful to call it the Islamic Scientology?
No, because from what I've read, Scientology, I think the Nation of Islam under Farrakhan has managed to kind of like join forces with Scientology, which I find to be really, really troubling. But
Yeah.
in that particular case, yes, I would kind of equate it to that. And this was years before our L. Ron Hubbard even created Scientology. So,
Wow.
yeah, so that's kind of like the major difference in terms of differences between between what Elijah Muhammad was teaching, what Farrakhan was teaching. I mean, it's weird. We did not really consider Farrakhan to be like a great or any sort of like a fantastic leader. We always found him to be a little more to be like a person who kind of like rose up through the ranks by by being a bit of a kiss butt or something like that. So we didn't really see him as like the next iteration of the Nation of Islam. But for all intents and purposes, it pretty much is. I mean, he uses a lot of iconography and language that Elijah Muhammad used ever while he was the messenger, while he was the head of the Nation of Islam, and just moved forward with it. He still celebrates Savior's Day, which is like this Nation of Islam version of Christmas that even my family celebrated back in every February 26th. In fact, it was kind of a weird aside. February 26, 1989 was actually the first day I got my first computer as like my own home computer, and so that was kind of like the whole start of me becoming like a huge fan of Atari and all that sort of thing.
Yeah.
So that all started from like a Savior's Day gift.
Wow. Wow.
But yeah, so those are like the two major like differences between like the current versions of the Nation of Islam and the original, or the Elijah Muhammad version of the Nation of Islam. So, yeah.
And what is the difference between being an imam and a messenger?
I think an imam is specifically a lot more like a standard Islamic leader of a mosque, if I'm not mistaken. I will admit my knowledge of like real Orthodox Islam is kind of sketchy in the regard that after I left the religion, I kind of didn't really follow up with any sort of like stuff that went on with the actual religion, because that wasn't really my focus at that point. I was a computer science major, for God's sakes. But yeah, and I think that, but the thing about Elijah Muhammad being the messenger of Allah was the fact that I don't think he considered himself a prophet, but he did consider himself to be the messenger of the person they believed to be God in person, who was W.D. Far-ahd Muhammad, or Master Far-ahd Muhammad. And so that particular and so he found himself to be under the tutelage of Far-ahd Muhammad up until his disappearance until 1934, and then Elijah Muhammad took over as his messenger. And so that's how that all went.
Interesting. Wow, there's like so many layers there. That's so interesting. And I guess I also didn't realize how modern of a religion that would be. I guess I assumed it would be ancient, just because I feel like any exposure that the modern day white person has to Islam is usually like the ancient version that they and so interesting. So
I mean, this whole religion got started, this whole offshoot of the religion got started in like 1930, and Elijah Muhammad took over 4 years later, and then went on to to lead it all the way up until his death. So yeah,
interesting. So what was it about the faith that you kind of decided wasn't necessarily for you? Was there a moment, was there a lesson, or was it just kind of an overall feeling?
It was an overall feeling. I mean, one of the things that my mom in particular really did in her infinite wisdom, and I don't mean that with any sort of sarcasm or anything like that. This was a really, really wise decision. She really downplayed the whole religion, the whole racial aspects of the Nation of Islam when we were very, very young.
Yeah,
because she was brought up in the religion that said, that talked about how Christians are going out to get you, that the white people are the devil, and so forth and so on. And when she was trying to teach that to me and Olive, she realized that this would not really work, especially given the fact that both of us went to a very advanced, gifted elementary school with friends from all over the city of all different races and creeds.
Right.
And so to put into our heads that these people are devils and they will burn in hell and everything like that, that did not really. And I even asked Mom that when I was like 7 years old. Does that mean my elementary school teacher is going to go to hell? Does that mean that my friends are going to, get destroyed by the mothership and everything? And she couldn't really have that. She couldn't really say yes they will, but she also couldn't say no they wouldn't either at that time, because she was also really still into that religion. But she really downplayed those aspects and talked more about doing for self and everything like that in that regard, as well as the whole more things that are related to classic Islam, being there's only one God but Allah and everything like that. But but yeah, that so my connection with that particular strain of the religion was kind of like broken in that particular case, and it kind of disintegrated from there. I started having like tests on myself because there would always be, there would always be the notion that we shouldn't insult God, we shouldn't insult Master Muhammad or anything like that. But I would sometimes like say something in my head just to test to see whether or not God was listening. And then if something horrible happened, then that means that he heard me or something like that. But but for pretty much all the times, nothing would happen, and so
Right.
and so that kind of like ate away at it there, as well as the fact that I remember seeing a George Carlin special,
Of
and
course.
and up until then, I did not really know about the concept of people that didn't believe in any God whatsoever. I was just under the impression that there are Christians, Muslims, and Jewish people and everything like that, and all of them believed in some sort of God or multiple gods, but they just all believed them in this particular supreme being with different like multifaceted ways in order to do so.
Right.
But the whole idea of not believing in a God at all that he mentioned at the end of that special, where he talked about being a sun worshiper and worshiping Joe Pesci and other things he could actually see, that really got my mind thinking about the whole concept of the notion that there may not be a God at all. And so that kind of like germinated inside of me
Oh, good word. I love that word. Germinated. That's a good word.
Thank you. Yeah, it kind of like grew in the back of my mind like a sand pebble turning into a pearl inside of an oyster or something like that. Not to say that atheism is like a pearl or something like that, but it did kind of get the wheels to moving. But I do think that the major event, and it sounds rather cliche. I realize this, but it kind of was a catalyst. Was September 11th, 2001. When I saw that there were people, not in New Jersey or anything like that, but I did see people like actively celebrating, and also people that I cared about actually feeling positive about that particular event when innocent people were vaporized, burning to death, falling to their death, crushed by
Right.
falling buildings. I just felt that was I couldn't really ascribe to that, and so
Right.
that was really the moment that my affinity for being a part of anything in relation to pretty much any major religion, and see that as any sort of positive, that kind of got out of my head at that point. There, I couldn't
Yeah.
really do that myself. So yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. That's interesting. That's so interesting because you always hear about Christians' opinion of 9/11 and like how they felt, but it's very interesting to hear a non-Christian aspect of like, oh, I don't necessarily agree with what's being said about, the people who died in 9/11. Very
Mhm.
interesting. Now, are there any aspects of the religion that you still adhere in your life, like any life lessons that you're like, well, that's pretty reasonable advice. Like, I'll keep that around.
Yeah. I don't drink or smoke or do drugs. So I think the biggest drug I take are like the medications that I take for like my hip or something like
Yeah.
that. But
And that's like
um,
hard to do as a comedian. That's
it is, yeah.
that's hard to do. Yeah. Like forget religion. That's hard to do just as a comedian in general.
Precisely, yeah. And I kind of, and a lot of, and for the longest time it was because of religion, but now I just want to keep up the streak. I managed to go 42 years without drinking alcohol, and I don't want to downplay people who are going through recovery and are trying
Yeah,
to
no,
get
of
past
course.
alcohol or anything like
Of
that.
course. Yeah.
But I do like the idea that I was able to maintain the streak and just not be drawn into the temptations of it. It does get a bit more interesting whenever I have gotten up on stage, after seeing 5 comedians before me talking about how they are, they enjoy drinking, and they just did some marijuana after being on Molly for 5 days straight or something like that. And then I come up and say, well, that Robitussin, that gives you a kick in
Yeah.
the teeth, doesn't it? Uh, so,
Oh, that's great.
and I know I could use that in some way, shape, or form to provide some sort of like, alternate view or something like
Yeah.
that on
Yeah.
stage. But
Yeah.
I need to write out the jokes for that and actually perform it on stage, which I'm hoping to
Right.
do as comedy clubs continue to reopen and all that there.
Right.
Yeah, so I don't do any of that. I still don't eat pork, actually. I was just always so raised to consider pork to be such a vile a vile food stuff that I don't really ascribe to eating it. It's not like
Yeah.
it's not like I will. It's not that I find out I'll go to hell or something like that if I do eat it.
No.
I just don't really want to eat
You're
it.
like, it's just gross. You're like, I just don't want to put a pig in my mouth. That's all.
Exactly. Yeah, I'm not also crazy about pigs. I've seen what they've done in places where they've gone to the bathroom, and I just don't need. I just don't want to eat that. So,
Well, and not only
um,
that, but wasn't there a study that came out that said like pigs were genetically closer to human beings than like most other living creatures or something to that effect, where
Yeah,
you're like, is
yeah.
this cannibalism? I don't know. I
It, it's
don't.
it, it's almost borderline. It's
Almost.
almost to the point of eating like other primates. I'm not all, so yeah, I'm not all too keen on that right now.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, but no,
That's
I so
funny.
I don't pray. I don't. We my family did observe Ramadan, but it was at different points in time than Orthodox Islam.
Right.
They would always do it in December, which I think was actually a little bit smarter, especially for people in like North America, because you can't eat from sunrise to sunset, and those are when that's when the shortest days are. So you can
That's
so
actually genius.
I think the Nation of Islam was kind of onto something with that, but and then but also on New Year's Eve we would have like the smorgasbord of like beef hot dogs
Oh,
and like beef
nice.
bacon and everything like that. It was delicious. But anyway, so yeah, those are like, but I never really observed Ramadan because they realized that I'm going to school. I need food in order to
Right.
go to school.
Right. You're
So
gonna like fall asleep in class or
yeah,
like not be able to
exactly.
get up and go. Yeah.
so they
Interesting.
so 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 my mom and my grandmother decided to give me a bit of a pass on that one there, and they would say, yeah, you're just going to observe Ramadan when you get older. And then I dropped Islam altogether when I got older, so it didn't really so no, but I think the major ones are just the whole idea of doing for self, and and also try to form your own opportunities and all that. But yeah, a lot of things that the Nation of Islam believes in, I just completely was just I just did not want to take any sort of part in everything for like the racial aspects and all that sort of. That was never a part of my psyche at that point.
Right.
So yeah, but some of the more esoteric aspects regarding food and everything, those are kind of still there. So yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah. And would you say that there were, back when you were practicing, would you say that there were a lot of stereotypes about people who follow Islam? Was there?
Yeah. With a name like mine, I did get called a terrorist a couple of times after the World Trade Center bombing in
That's wild.
1993. That was aggravating, to say the least.
Yeah, of course.
And because I didn't believe in anything like that. I mean, I found the World Trade Center to be a really cool looking building structure. I
Yeah,
always
you're
found it
like,
to be like
I had nothing to do with what happened there, just so
exactly.
you know.
I always found it to be like it was almost like a rivalry between the Knicks and the Bulls. For me, it was the Sears Tower versus the World Trade Center, and they would build like taller and taller antennas after that. But no, I do believe that yeah, there were quite a few. I mean, there were also a lot of stereotypes about Nation of Islam people that were on television and so forth. I remember there was a sketch on In Living Color back in the 1990s, and they had Star Trek to the Wrath of Farrakhan, and in that sketch they had a whole bunch of like Nation of Islam people got onto the bridge. Some of them were selling bean pies and selling Final Call newspapers and stuff. So there are a lot of like immediate notions about what a Nation of Islam person was in the media as well,
Right.
and not just in terms of like just Islam in general.
Yeah.
Although bean pie is rather delicious, so I kind of understand that here, But yeah, so yeah, there were quite a few stereotypes that went along with the religion,
Yeah.
and either they were done for laughs, and I wasn't all too unnerved by that. But then there were also the ones like that schoolmate who called me a terrorist. That kind of
Yeah.
that rubbed me the wrong way. But yeah, that's about it.
Yeah. Were there any stereotypes of the faith that you didn't think applied to you, but then when you were out and like looking back in, you're like, oh yeah, that's actually pretty accurate?
Um, if there were, I don't think I saw any of them. I'm pretty sure that there were. Now I'm trying to think. I mean, I do know that I do remember that the movie Malcolm X did show the Nation of Islam in a rather honest view. I mean, it was originally the religion that Malcolm Little, who later became Malcolm X, who later became Malik Al-Shabazz, I believe. It saved him from a life of crime and a life of being in jail and everything like that. And he became a very, very strong leader in the Nation of Islam.
Yeah.
And then he left the Nation of Islam when he realized how, first of all, how human and how not people, how frail, not frail either. It's like that sorry, you may have to end this out.
No, yeah, go for it.
People can make mistakes, can make horrible decisions. In the case of Elijah Muhammad, he decided to have multiple children with his secretaries. And actually, you know what? Yeah, people did ask me that in elementary school. People would say, how many children did Elijah Muhammad have? And we were always taught that, that Malcolm was wrong and that Elijah Muhammad only had children with his wife and everything like that. But
Oh,
when I got out of the religion, it was clear that Elijah Muhammad did do some
yeah,
extracurricular activities, as it were. So
yeah.
but anyway, yeah. So that stereotype was definitely there, and I just didn't really recognize that. But they also showed out, and the movie just very, very plainly says that there were members of the Nation of Islam that were responsible for the assassination of Malcolm X. So, in that particular regard, I do think that those sorts of stereotypes, that's not really a stereotype, it's mainly just a depiction overall, saying that this was what was happening in the Nation of Islam at that time. So,
well, and I think that applies to literally any historical figure that's held in a positive light. The older you get, the more you're like, they did what? They did what? Like, oh, they invented the light bulb. Yeah, but they also had like 21 kids with their slaves. Did you know they had slaves? Yeah. Or, oh, they were a great leader of this nation. And also pretty sure they murdered like 6 of their wives. I feel I feel like in order to reach the level of power that makes you a historical figure, you have to have done some shady shit. And
that's unfortunately true. I mean, if I were to do that, I'm pretty sure that there would be some things that would be happening under the table, unfortunately. But hopefully we just move financially instead of murder. But anyway,
right, like if I became famous, people would be like, but have you seen her internet search history? Like, have you seen it? It's like, listen, just build a statue of me. Shut the fuck up and build a statue. Now, how would you say that your life has changed since leaving the faith? Like, did it impact your relationship with any family members, or did it impact your life entirely, or just the religious aspect? What would you say has been how long have you been out of the faith?
I've been out of the faith probably since 2001, more specifically. I mean, I do remember there was a point where because we were taught that America was so evil and everything like that, that I refused to sing like the Pledge of Allegiance or God Bless America, or even any sort of like pro-America things. So, but I do remember that after that, I'm like, there was like this day of remembrance, I believe on September the 15th, and there was a gathering of people, and I was my final year in college at that time, so that's something to look forward to after graduation. But anyway, we were all there was like a group of us that were gathering together in order to pay respects to the people that passed, and just it was like a gathering of remembrance for the school, and they all started singing God Bless America. And at that point, I just said, you know what, screw it. God bless America. So so I think it was definitely at that point where I realized that things might change in that regard there. So yeah, 2001 was probably that turning point year.
Interesting.
Now, in terms of how it differs between now and then, for one thing, I find it a little bit more freeing. Even though I know that I could be wrong in this aspect, but I do feel that when I was first of all, there was a lot of pressure placed upon me being named after 2 of the founders of the Nation of Islam.
I bet, yeah.
Especially from my grandmother. She was saying, "You're bringing that name out there to the people," and everything like that. And I just wanted to be on television. I didn't want to, be the next leader of anything.
Yeah, you're like, I don't want to be a great leader. I just want people to laugh at my jokes.
Exactly.
Like, what do I gotta
do? The expectations that were placed on my shoulders in regards to being a representative of some religion or another really was kind of eliminated at that point, and I could kind of pursue what I wanted to pursue. Also, I feel that I feel that a religious upbringing was good in terms of like moral stories and everything like that, and I think that's also true for a lot of other people,
like Aesop's fables almost.
Pretty much there. And I think that and for being a good person in that regard there, but I believe it is not inherently necessary for one to be of a faith in order to be a good person or to be a moral person. And so I feel that I can be at most times as possible to be as good of a person as possible to as many people as I can. And so without the fear of offending God or having lightning bolts thrown at me or something like that, it allows me to just be who I am, but just be the best part of who I am at all times.
Interesting.
And it kind of like, and also it kind of like I remember there was a quote inside of House MD. I keep relating things to television and movies, I know, but there was a
It's
quote from
almost like
House.
you're in entertainment or something.
Almost, I tell you, where he talked about the whole where House talked about the concept of religion and all that there, and he said that I feel that whatever happens here isn't only a test, and the whole
Ooh,
notion that being a good person should not be, it should not be like some sort of, it's not like getting like a punch card punched at a restaurant in order to get a free Subway sandwich
right,
when you're done. It's, and to boil it down to a rather like nonsensical thing,
right,
it's not about getting to some place after I die. It's to have the best life that I can while I have it here, because it is completely unknowable as to what happens afterwards.
right,
I mean,
right,
I would love for it to be, because here's the deal. I always had in the back of my head the notion that my life was a television show, kind of
like the Truman Show.
like the Truman Show, actually. Yeah. And
Yeah.
I've had this like when I was like 2 or 3 years old, so like early 80s. I've been thinking about this. The channel was called, originally it was called Channel 1, now it's called Channel 78. In fact, that's kind of the name of my YouTube channel at this point. But but I always wanted it so that whenever I leave, I would either see credits, or somebody would just yell cut, and I would hear an audience applaud in the background. So that's sort of thing I would like to see afterwards there. And then whatever happens afterwards, I don't really know. But I nobody really knows what happens after what happens after the unknowable.
Right.
And I feel that not believing in anything kind of frees me up to say that I don't have to worry about what happens afterwards, because
Right.
because if I do as good of a job here, that's what matters to me. So
Right. Exactly.
yeah.
Exactly. And I think that's so important. And I love that you called it the unknowable, because I've talked to people about this on this podcast before. I feel like admitting, even as a religious person, even if like you were still a staunchly religious person, admitting that you don't know something is so important, because to me, there's nothing more damaging than somebody who doesn't know what's going on, pretending to know everything and like
Precisely.
spreading that message like they know how everything works, as opposed to somebody who admits that they don't know and is willing to learn and research and think and come to their own conclusions and
Precisely.
admit that they came to their own conclusions, as opposed to no, this is what this means, I know this 100%. Like, why? Because I just was chosen, just believe me, trust me.
And I read it in a book. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, exactly. So is your wife religious, or did she grow up religious?
She she is religious. She grew up Lutheran. She still is Lutheran.
Interesting.
Yeah, and I'm getting a lot more information about what the different like facets of Lutheranism is, and like the different subsects and everything.
Yep.
Originally she was raised, I believe, with the LCMS, or the Missouri Synod, and now she is with ELCA, or I'm trying to remember which synod that one is. I'm sure if Patty were here right now, she would be able to like yell us through the wall. But no, she's now with the ELCA, and so now she is which is a lot more of a liberal form of Lutheranism, very very welcoming all different sorts of peoples, and all different sorts of like creeds and genders and everything like that. I mean, the church that she goes to has a female pastor, so there you go.
Wow.
So
that's interesting. And I do feel like I've heard a lot more about Lutheran churches with gay or female pastors than I have about most other religions. And what is that like, being married to somebody who, one, is still religious, two, is religious in a totally different religion than you grew up in? How does that affect your dynamic?
Well, for one thing, it allows me to maintain a respect for people who have different religions.
Right.
And I've always believed that myself. Even when I was taught like Christianism is horrible and everything like that, I'm not going to tell people that they're believing in the wrong religion, because that's not really up to me.
Right. Exactly.
And so I do find it fascinating to see the different ways in which people inside of a Lutheran church interact with each other.
Yes.
And it's it's also a very positive message. I'm sure that if I were raised with it, I would probably stick with it as well, but that's just not how I am right now, and I don't think that's how I will be. But I do find it to be a rather a welcoming and very forgiving sort of group there. And the thing is that she Patty is very finds the celebrations of holidays like Easter and Christmas to be very, very, very important, and to be
Mhm.
celebrated with family and everything like that. And it's real, and I find it to be really comforting that to see, that there is like this familial connection
Yeah.
that exists between a whole bunch of people throughout all the generations and for many, many years. That sort of thing did not really happen with me, and I think that was one of the things that I really that I really did not like about the Nation of Islam altogether, was the fact that they actively had people to kind of like separate themselves from their own families. And they called Christian Black people that did not join the Nation of Islam lost founds, which I found to be interesting, which I found to be rather odd, because if they were lost and found, does that mean that they were found by the way that they described it was kind of strange, but yeah, so we did not really have a lot of family get-togethers with my side of the family ever. I mean, it was like I never really hung out with my cousins or my aunts and uncles or anything like that. And I think the same thing happened on my dad's side of the family as well. I mean, I've only seen I've seen my uncles a lot, but that's about it. I'd also seen my grandparents, but other than that, like any sort of cousins or anything like that on my dad's side of the family, I couldn't tell you who they were. On my mom's side of the family, I've seen a couple of uncles, and I've seen like a bunch of my cousins once or maybe twice, and that's it. And the major reason for that is because when my grandmother joined the Nation of Islam with my maternal grandfather, who unfortunately died when he was like 24 years old, the Nation of Islam really focused on the whole notion that you need to separate from them and have your family to be the Nation of Islam itself, and that's practically cultish at that point here, and that really provided a dividing line between the history of whatever my family was and whatever my family is. And I find, and I now know that I am lacking something like that whenever I see like these generations of Patty's family, just interacting with each other and having fun and going to Christmas and Thanksgiving and everything like that. That was just something I never did. So it's interesting. It's very interesting.
Is there any part of Islam that you miss?
The presence on Savior's Day, pretty much.
You're like, I miss getting computers for holidays. That's what I miss. I miss Tetris.
Yes. But I think the major thing that I miss in regards to the religion of itself is probably my grandmother. She died in 2015, and she was a fervent believer of the Nation of Islam, or at least the Elijah Muhammad version of the Nation of Islam, all the way up until she died. And she would give me and my brother lectures about all that sort of stuff. And while in the moment it was a rather hard experience to go through, because she would give us like doom and gloom lessons about the great and dreadful day of the Lord and how there's going to be this big famine coming and everything like that. Oof. It's not that I miss it, but I just miss being in grandmother's presence,
right?
And her religion was inextricably part of grandmother, and so that's one part of the Nation of Islam that I miss, but it has nothing to do with the religion itself. It just has to do with my grandmother. So
like whatever religion she would have been staunchly believing in would have made you miss her, kind of.
Yeah, exactly. Pretty much. Yeah.
And how did you ever feel like, or did you ever in general have to kind of come out as non-religious to your family? Did they just eventually figure it out? Do they even know yet?
My grandmother did not know.
Never tell grandma. Never ever tell grandma. That's like golden rule number one.
Yeah, she would have written me out of whatever will that she wrote, but she ended up not doing so. Even though she was 81 years old, but she said she wasn't planning on dying that year, and so she didn't write out a will. For goodness sakes!
Oh my god!
But and then her heart just gave out. But regardless, I did talk to. I remember talking about this with my brother. And he also was kind of like going away from the whole notion of, being an Elijah Muhammad Muslim and stuff, and more focusing on being more spiritual. And for a while, I was also, quote, spiritual but not religious, unquote. But but I remember that we were both kind of like going to those same conclusions at the same time. And my mom was a little bit different. She got out of the Nation of Islam entirely by the time that she was in her 40s. Yeah.
That's interesting.
Yeah, she now is, from what I understand, is close to a born again Christian, but she always says that she doesn't really go to a church or anything like that. She just has a personal relationship with God and believes in the Jesus theme, as she calls it. So
Yeah,
she,
that's interesting. Why do
it's,
you think that? Like, why is that? Why would somebody like what would drive somebody to change entirely that late in life?
probably just because she just realized that whatever she was being brought up with grandmother was just not the right way to go about, was just not the right way to go about living out one's life.
Yeah.
And we've seen through the example of grandmother that even though she lived a long life, I don't think it was an entirely happy one,
Yeah.
because she was always looking for the next like major disaster to come so that she could be able to talk about how God was punishing this person or that person or those people or whatever.
Yeah.
So she didn't want that. She wanted to have a life that was a lot more in tune with what she always believed God to be. But she and her belief in God is completely unfeasible, because she ended up having to raise two young men in the midst of the projects in the 1980s and 90s in order to get them into college. And she believes that nobody but God could have been able to have her to have the wherewithal in order to do so. Because now both my brother and I have master's degrees. We now have jobs in our field and everything like that. And that sort of thing just does not really happen within the projects. So so her belief in God is exceedingly unflappable.
Right.
And whatever, and she doesn't, and that's why she doesn't really believe in any sort of like one religion or another. She just believes that, God is there for her, and her angels are there for her, and I completely respect that notion. um it's not what I subscribe to, but I
Right.
completely understand her aspect of it, and completely understand the way that she goes about that. So when I told her that I don't believe in God, uh, that kind of, I'm sure that kind of rubbed her the wrong way. And every single time, and there are moments where she kind of like hints at the notion that whenever I get a child, I'll start believing in the concept of God's love, and that I will want to have God to guide me in order to raise a child and everything like that. And I really don't know if I'll ever have children, to be quite honest, because I'm in my 40s right now. But but even if I do, I don't know if I will immediately turn to God for answers. I might turn to my mom. I might turn to Olive. I might turn to other people that could be able to help me out and stuff like that.
Professionals,
Professional
psychologists.
psychologists, especially if there's something going on with it mentally, I would definitely would want to have some sort of therapy for the child.
Right.
I'm not going to
Right.
rely completely on God in order for
Right.
that to work out. So, no, but but it was a rather difficult concept for me to tell mom that I didn't really believe in a God at all,
Yeah.
especially after everything that she had gone through in terms of bringing me up and relying on God in order to do so. I think she respects it, and I think that she will, and I think that she probably thinks that I'll eventually believe in God again at some point in time, and who knows what'll happen, but
Yeah.
I don't think I will. But again, I can't predict the future.
Right.
But I'm pretty sure that. But I'm not going. I'm not going to chastise mom for believing in God. I'm not going to ridicule her or anything like that.
Right.
There, she
Yeah.
believes in what she believes in. I believe in what I don't believe in. So there you go. So that's.
Yeah. Yeah. Did you grow up in an area that was primarily like a Muslim area, or were
No,
you kind of the outlier in that area?
I've been an outlier pretty much anywhere I've been.
Yeah.
I was
Yeah.
I was like the only Muslim in my class. I was the only, I was the well, pretty much the only Muslim inside of the projects, aside from my immediate family, I'm
And
sure.
where did you grow up?
I grew up in the Ickes projects. That's was close to like, it's like a mile north of the Illinois Institute of Technology, right next to Chinatown, so around like Cermak and State Street.
Got it. Got
The
it.
project buildings there are no longer there. It's like the school or something like that, and some like lofts or whatever.
Of course, it's
No,
lofts. That's what
yes.
Chicago always does. It's got to put lofts everywhere.
But no, no, we lived in a. The thing is that my grandmother was a bit of a neighborhood, like not like not a folk hero, more like, it's just a regular denizen of the neighborhood. She worked over at the local advisory office for the Chicago Housing Authority, and she worked over there for 42 years. And
Wow.
so generations of people who lived in those projects remember the woman who they called Miss May, because her name was originally Mayella Mumford, and then she changed it to Nazira Zefiola. So Ms. May was always like a constant presence inside of that neighborhood there. People would always go up to her door and ask for pieces of candy, and she would always have pieces of candy for them to get.
Yeah.
And from what I understand, because it didn't look, because I guess funerals are kind of weird for me. When grandmother died, apparently somebody left a bag of candy in her casket, and
Oh,
that's just beautiful there. But
right.
um
Yeah.
but regardless, we lived in a primarily Black neighborhood, but we did not live in a primarily Nation of Islam neighborhood.
Right.
So yeah, but we were also kind of known to be like Ms. May's grandchildren or Ms. May's kids, because some people didn't recognize the whole concept of age. But but no, so we kind of had that sort of notoriety about ourselves, but at the same time, we were also kind of like, I mean, we didn't. I mean, I know that my brother and I were taught like different, taught about how to properly talk in English and so forth. Unlike now, apparently, but so we didn't really sound like anybody else in our neighborhood. We didn't go to the same school as everybody in our neighborhood. So we were always a bit of an outlier and a bit of a mystery for everybody else that surrounded us there. So yeah,
interesting. My brain keeps going back to this idea that your mom was so religious that she even named her son after the religious leaders, and then to change religions entirely. That must have been both eye-opening and probably a little bit traumatic at the same time.
Oh, I can imagine. Yeah. Because this was a religion that she stood by for years and years, and it failed her for the most part, from what I understand. And so
that must have been devastating.
It definitely was, but she was able to recover. She managed to kind of embrace that notion of wanting to have a more personal relationship with God. She started celebrating Christmas more. She had
that's honestly the best part of being a Christian. Give me that Christmas, good.
I mean, thankfully she didn't put whenever our class would have like a Christmas party, she didn't have us to wait in the library or something like that.
Right.
We enjoyed all the celebrations of Christmas, because for the most part, Christmas celebrations in schools and everything like that are a lot more secular than
they're almost entirely secular. Yeah.
So she felt if the kids want to have a party, then they should go. Then they should go to the party. But we also did not have a Christmas tree at home. We, there was all different sorts of Christmas that was happening all around us, for everything from like downtown with all the lights all over the buildings to, like neighboring apartments inside of the projects that have lights in their windows as well. But we didn't, and we ended up just having like our regular home during the time of Christmas, and we ended up just having like a 3-hour long lecture from grandmother, or we would go over to we would have a staycation before it was a term, over to like a local hotel or something like that, in order to in order just to be with each other for during the holidays. So it was so I'm kind of forgetting what the initial question of this was, but
we were just talking about like growing up in kind of like a Christian area, being a non-Christian, and the experience there.
It was an interesting process. Oh yeah, and we also talk about mom, but yeah. So she finally had a Christmas tree. I remember she apparently celebrated Christmas or went to a family Christmas get together when she was like 2, and she wanted to recreate that after she decided to completely eschew that religion, and she's been doing so ever since. So there you go. That was definitely a seismic shift in terms of mom's belief system, and I'm glad that she was able to get through that with as little damage as possible. So that was really cool.
Because I feel like something that I've seen as kind of a pattern in people that I talk to on this podcast who go from religious to non-religious, because I do talk to a lot of people who are still religious. There's like a grief period that you have to go through first. Like, even if you're like, I'm 100% cool, like not believing in this anymore, there's this weird grief period where you have to just kind of like confront the idea that everything you ever spent your childhood developing your identity around is no longer true. And you can't go back to a point where you can convince yourself that it's true ever again. And so you almost have to like grieve that before you can then move on to whatever the next step is for you, whether it's atheism, agnosticism, a different religion, and it's very interesting and so I imagine for her that must have been quite an adventure, ordeal.
Yeah.
I don't know. Yeah.
And it definitely was for me too, because one of the things that my mom and grandmother were talking about in terms of religion was the fact that we were not going to technically live forever, but we were going to be, after the mothership were to arrive, because of course it's a mothership, in order to destroy America, they were going to take us to what was known as the hereafter, where eyes have not seen and ears have not heard, or something along those lines. And we were supposed to revert back to like our 16-year-old selves or something like that. I don't know how that works, but anyway, what I was
I
always, I
never want
always
to
had
be
like,
16 again. I know you could not pay me enough. I hope heaven, I'm 30. I hope I'm 30. Like
30
if
would
there
be
is a
nice,
heaven, I
yes.
hope I stay this age.
And maybe that was just something that Elijah Muhammad was having to deal with. I don't know. But the fact of the matter is that I always was comforted over the notion that, no matter what happens, my family was always going to be there
Right.
through eternity. But then when I realized that no, we too were also going to die at some point in time, that is, and for that to happen in my 20s, that's something that really like jarred me. The whole
Yes.
idea that I am going to have to attend my mother's funeral at some point, and that's the
Yes.
best case scenario, because then if it weren't, then that means that mom is attending my funeral instead.
Right.
Oh, just it was
Yeah.
just absolute, it rocked me to my core at that
Yeah.
point.
Yeah. That's like the toughest part because I feel like there, while a lot of religions are different, they are also very, very similar in many aspects. And I feel like the afterlife aspect, with the exception of Judaism, who I don't believe believes in an afterlife,
Right.
um, I think a lot of or I've heard from people that a lot of that grieving process has to do with the fact that you're realizing you will never see those people again. When
Right.
like growing up Baptist, it was always, oh, like grandma's watching you, like grandma's looking down on you, like your loved ones are, watching over everything that you do and they're so proud of you. But the moment that you realize like they're as dead as they're ever going to be, and one day me too,
Mhm.
I feel like that's like the process that really makes people grieve the most. So at least with her, she went from one afterlife believing religion to
To
another.
another, yeah.
Right. Um, but is there any aspect of like Christianity or fundamentalism that makes you be like, yeah, I mean, we believed a lot of crazy shit, but like we don't believe as much crazy shit as y'all do. I've always
um
wondered what we look like to outside religions.
it's weird. I think that the descriptions of Christianity that was given to me was kind of uh it was kind of skewed, possibly. So I don't know. So I mean, the way, I mean, now that I've been to a few Lutheran religious gatherings and stuff, it's a little bit less of a it's a little bit less of of any of the sort of craziness that one might consider inside of like a fundamental sort of Christian sort of deal there. So I can't really. I mean, the whole idea of the rapture kind of confuses me,
Yeah.
or Jesus coming back in a chariot. I mean, but then at the same time, I remember that people especially mom and grandmother, when they were like fervent in the original, it's like, oh, Jesus coming back in a chariot. I mean, you got to believe in something real, like God coming back in a spaceship that was built in 1914. I'll tell you something right there. That's the truth, right there. So it, it was kind of weird to kind of
A
to kind of
chariot. It's 2022. We have rocket
exactly,
ships.
precisely, but I do think that there are some aspects of Christianity that I might see to be a bit outlandish, but at the same time, I don't think anything can top the mothership though. So
Right. You're like, listen, we have a mothership. There's nothing you guys can say that makes you look crazier.
yeah, precisely. So yeah.
That's so interesting. That's so interesting. If you had a message or a lesson for anybody who might be experiencing what you're going through, maybe they grew up kind of strictly Muslim, or even on the more liberal Muslim side, and they're
Mhm.
considering like, do they still believe, are they sure, what would you say to somebody who's currently going through what you went through?
Um, I would almost treat it like the discovery of the truth of Santa Claus. Because yeah, Master Prophet Muhammad was pretty much my Santa Claus at that point. Um, and just know that no matter what you no matter how your beliefs will change over the course of the years that are going to be ahead, just know that there are going to be people who will still love you, who will still care for you, and who will still respect you, no matter what decision you may have. And it's good to surround yourself with those people, especially during a turbulent transition like this one. And it would also be very helpful to just believe in something that you feel will provide the best, that'll be the best in terms of your mental health, as well as in terms of your physical health, and just live the best life that you possibly can. um and then, you know, and I think that no matter what you believe in, whatever good that will arrive will not be in spite of any sort of changes in your religion. Anything bad that might happen is not because of your change of religion.
Interesting. I like that.
Yeah.
I like that a lot. Well, in terms of where can we find you, your entertainment life, is there an Instagram, a website, a web calendar? Where can we see you? When are you going to California?
My hope is that I will be in California starting in July. We're still in the midst of planning. We're still in the midst of packing and everything. We still need to find an apartment. Anyway, so we hope to be on the West Coast by as soon as July. Hopefully by the end of August we will be fully ensconced. Or the
Good
beginning
word.
of August.
You've got so many $1 million words. We've got ensconced. There was
germinate.
Germinate. I was like, what was that? Yeah, germinate and wow.
So yeah, but you can always find me on Instagram. Oh God, here it goes. Whenever I give my Instagram name, I have to predicate it by saying my name is spelled F-A-R-D, even though it is pronounced Far-ahd, because screw English. No, because my name is actually an Arabic word, Far-ahd, F-A-R-D, with a dot under it for some reason, and that is an Arabic word meaning obligatory. So so it is spelled F-A-R-D, but it's supposed to be pronounced Far-ahd. That's how it's pronounced. It was pronounced Far-ahd by everybody in the Nation of Islam back then. So I'm just going to go with it. So you can find me at Fard Muhammad, F-A-R-D M-U-H-A-M-M-A-D. That's also my Twitter handle. I am also on Facebook at facebook.com/Mr. Far-ahd Muhammad, not Master Far-ahd Muhammad, M-R Far-ahd Muhammad. I think that's about it. I do have a website, but it's currently under construction at this point, so hopefully it'll be ready at least by the beginning of the fall, and that will be heyitsfarahd.com, HEYITSFARD.
I like that. I like that. Well, Far-ahd, thank you so much for donating your time and your experiences and your story. I really enjoyed talking to you. I learned so much today that I did not know. I'm not gonna lie, I'm gonna spend the next couple of hours looking up this whole mothership thing because I'm kind of on board with it, to be honest with you. I'm kind of you may have actually swayed me to become religious again. And I just realized on board could have been a great pun for a spaceship, but I ruined it. I just kept talking. But yeah, thank you so much. I really appreciate that you being a part of this podcast and sharing your message. And I really hope that there's people out there listening to this that will identify with it, or at least find some kind of peace with their separation from their religion, because it's hard to do.
It is hard, yeah, and this podcast, along with the other people that are going to be interviewed for this podcast, would provide a very, it would be an excellent service for those sorts of people. So I'm glad that you're doing this here.
Yeah, and thank you for your service to this podcast as well. I couldn't interview people if I didn't have people to interview. So, well, thank you, sir, and I hope you have a wonderful rest of your weekend.
Thanks, you too.
And I will, if you don't mind, I'll link to your socials and things in this episode. Perfect. Yeah. All right. Well, thank you, sir. Have a great one. Stay safe out there.
All right. You too. Bye-bye. Bye.